Need some new Innistrad Midnight Hunt cards? Well, you can order them now from our sponsor, Card Kingdom, by heading over to cardkingdom.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to a super fun video. Every set release, we like to talk about, after spoiler season is done, what cards from this set might actually make waves in 60 card competitive formats. And today, it is modern day for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. And to talk about the top 10 modern cards from the set, I am joined, like usual, by Crim. How's it going today, Crim?
Yo, I'm excited. Looks like Innistrad, this is going to be probably one of the better Innistrads. I think I like it the most flavor-wise. Yeah. But we'll see if this has a Lily or a Snapcaster.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. So we're counting down the top 10 modern cards from this set. And it's a little weird. We're just coming off Modern Horizons, which is a set that's like super pushed right for modern. So it's hard for any standard set to live up to that level. But there's some really sweet modern cards from this set. And we're going to count them down from 10 to 1. And before we do, couple of quick things. One is, this is a combined list from me and Crim. So if you want to see our individual list that we had before we mashed them all together for the video, you can head over to MTGGoldfish.com. I'll link the article in the description. And yeah, let's count down our top 10 modern cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. And coming in at number 10 on our list, we got an innocent little 2-drop, Bloodthirsty Adversary, coming down with haste on turn 2 and then maybe flashing back some spells Snapcaster style on turn 5. Crim, is this the Snapcaster of the set?
This is extremely light version of Snapcaster. The fact that it's like sorcery speed makes it a little interesting, but the fact that it's haste, it scales, it's aggressive, it's not your typical like control style Snapcaster, right? So this is going to be a powerful card, I think, in other decks. Is it Snapcaster? This isn't going to be. This is not it yet. So I like the card though. I think it's very aggressive. It looks powerful, and I think Burn could play it. I think Lurrus could play it. And actually Burn already has Lurrus, so why not?
Yeah, you cast this from your graveyard with Lurrus, and then you pay its kicker, and then you flash back a burn spell, and you do that again. I don't know if Burn is my favorite home for this card, though. Honestly, what I'm hyped for, there's a couple of things. One is, this is basically a Goblin Dark Dwellers, and even though it hasn't really developed into a top-tier deck in Modern, there have been Goblin Dark Dweller decks that have like 5-0 leagues and stuff, often playing land destruction spells and flashing them back. I'm going to be interested to see if having like 12 Stone Rains and 8 Goblin Dark Dwellers could actually make for like a real deck in the format.
Ponza is a real home for this. I think it's a real home. But what do you think about this? Is like, we're seeing red dominate Modern, right? So red is continuing to get more powerful cards. Is this the 2-drop that kind of now finally changes Jund? Is this going to be in Modern? Is this going to be in Mardu? Right? Like, those are variants that we're seeing a lot of now for 3-color decks. So you get Ponza, you get Mardu, you get Jund. You know, like, this just continues to push everything towards becoming, outside of Ponza, just a Lurrus style deck. And Jund and Mardu seem like a great home for this too.
Yeah, I could see some arguments for that. I think it is 5 mana to pay the kicker, which is, or a pseudo kicker, that is a little bit, but there's certainly shenanigans. I think the other thing I'm really high on about it is, it's a way you can recast no mana value spells, like, recast Crashing Footfalls, let's say, or some of these Cascade spells, which we've seen Cascade decks really take off in the last few months since Modern Horizons 2, like, gave us Shardless Agent and some other support cards. So that's another shenanigan to keep in mind. So I guess that means there's a lot of possibilities for these cards. We've been talking about combo style decks with Crashing Footfalls, mid-range style decks, burn style decks, Lurrus aggro style decks. I mean, it's got to hit in one of those spots, right? Someone's going to want this card. I think it's too good. I don't know if it'll make it in all those homes, but it's too good not to show up in at least one of those decks. Please, Modern players, prove us right. We can't afford another Circle of Loyalty.
Yeah. Wait, did we choose that in Modern too? Wow, that's very egregious. Okay.
So let's move on. Number 9 on our list. We got a new Black Human Cleric, JERREN Corrupt Bishop, that is also the return of Ormondal on the backside. Crim, what do you think about this new mythic?
Okay, so this is an interesting card because, you know, once again, as human is a type that just continues to get better because it gets more and more, like printings every day. But whenever JERREN or another non-token human creature you control dies, you lose life and create another 1/1 white human. So this is pretty solid, right? Like if they remove JERREN, JERREN immediately enters the battlefield, makes a 1/1. Then, if they remove a non-token human, you get another 1/1. So then they'll have to then juggle whether, okay, am I killing JERREN? Am I killing something else? And it can give your humans lifelink. I think we had kind of talked about this a little before we started recording. As cool as the flavor of like a corrupted bishop sacrificing to a demon, like you know, flavor-wise is, I don't think you actually want the back half of Ormendahl, and you'll probably be at 13 life on turn 2. So you will be nowhere near 6 mana. So, which is fine because I don't think we care about the Ormendahl half, and if we ever get to that point, then sure. But JERREN on its own can create an army. It gives you a little bit of resiliency against maybe like a board wipe or something like that, and also gains you the life back. So I love this. It kind of just spawns its own army.
Yeah, I think this is a great card for humans. We've seen Xanthrid Necromancer in the distant past of humans be good enough to show up, if not in the main deck in small numbers, at least in the sideboard. And that, when a human you control dies, you make a 2/2 zombie. JERREN is that, but so much better. The fact that when the human dies, you get another human is a huge deal with cards like Champion of the Parish, with Thalia's Lieutenant. Plus, this on its own is 2 humans. So just coming into play, turn 1 Champion of the Parish, turn your Thalia's Lieutenant. This is 2 humans putting 2 counters on all your stuff. So just that part of JERREN is great. And then it's removal protection. If your opponent kills your stuff, or if they wrath your board, you're going to rebuild with a bunch of 1/1s. So I kind of am just like, especially in Modern. In Standard, it might be different, but in Modern, I'm kind of just ignoring Ormendahl. I don't think you're ever going to get to 6 mana, and you're ever going to be at exactly 13 life, maybe 1 in every like 100 games or something, like really, really infrequently. But just the front side is strong enough that I think that humans probably play it in the main deck. Worst case, I think they definitely play it in the sideboard. And even that lifelink ability is not like super like flashy, but in a deck where you have these massive Champion of the Parish, I imagine that JERREN, like, Ether Violet in, give your Champion of the Parish lifelink against aggro or burn or some of the Ragavan Dragon Rage Channeler decks, and you gain like 5 life or something. That's a game-winning line potentially if you're playing humans against aggro. So I think this card is a huge deal for humans. I think it's just great.
It's worth at least trying a Miser. You know what I mean? Like a singleton copy or 2 in your humans deck. It does a lot.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Number 8 on our list, we have Memory Deluge, which is a card that at first I was a little bit meh on for Modern, because you had a lot of options in Modern. You got Fact or Fiction and tons of card draw. But I think what sold me on this card is some people talking about using it with Wilderness Reclamation. We have these Wilderness Reclamation decks that are kind of control decks and doing the same standard shenanigans where you tap all your lands and untap all of them. In a deck like that, you have so much mana. This essentially gives you a pseudo dig through time. You can easily pay that 7 mana flashback, and then you're just digging through your deck to find your payoffs, your Nexus of Fate to win the game, or whatever finisher you're going to use. So I know, Nexus of Fate, but that's what sold me on this card. But Crim, you're the control master. Is there any merit to just playing this in a Modern control deck? Is it powerful enough for that without Wilderness Reclamation shenanigans?
I actually think this is only playable in like a Wilderness Rec deck. And I mean, first off, Wilderness Reclamation should have never been printed. But the thing here is that card that's the home for it, right? Because otherwise, I think control decks are packed to the brim with cheap, efficient spells already. And like example, Archmage's Charm is a 4 of, right? And you need to, like, the only other flex spots go to Esper Charm, which is very versatile and also draws you cards. And then if not, Kaya's Guile, which is too important to remove. So the lists are too tight for control to play this, but a deck like Wilderness Reclamation, or maybe something that wants specific combo pieces, can play this.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. There's a lot of options for control, but in the Wilderness Rec decks, or maybe some combo decks, it does have some potential in Modern, I think. Let's move forward. Number 7 on our list. We have Teferi, who slows the sunset. And I feel like we're living in Bizarro world because I'm pretty sure Teferi was on your modern list, but it was on my modern list. And normally you're the Teferi player, but I'm actually kind of high on this card in modern for one reason. I don't think its effect is like super crazy for modern, although the -2 is nice. And if you ultimate it, it's kind of insane, but I'm pretty high on its potential because I think this is going to be a free card a lot of the time. In modern, we got Utopia Sprawls, we got Birds of Paradises, and Noble Hierarchs. We have a lot of artifact lands that have been increasing in play since we got a bunch more in Modern Horizons. So it seems relatively easy, playing all good cards that you already want in your deck, to play your Teferi, untap a land with Utopia Sprawl, untap an artifact land, untap a Noble Hierarch, and essentially you got a free Teferi with 5 loyalty out of the deal that can then start either making more mana in future turns or down-ticking to find other payoffs. So in some weird way, I think I can sell myself on this Teferi being like budget Omnath, like how you have Omnath come down and immediately net back the mana that you spent on it and how explosive that is. I can almost sell myself on Teferi doing the same thing in modern. But Crim, you're the Teferi expert. What do you think about this Teferi's modern potential?
I like where your head's going with it. But I just think that there's better things you can do for 4 mana, right? Like I like, sure, let's say I
but free.
But let's just say I play Teferi, I untap all the things that you said, and no, for some odd reason, modern, nobody interacted with any of those things, right? Isn't it better to just play 3 Fairy or something that's cheaper, or like a Jace the Mind Sculptor?
Yeah, like, well, that's probably, but they cost mana, Crim. They cost mana.
They do cost mana, but let's say I do all of that and then I untap and it's like, okay, I have this Teferi that kind of just, I feel like is a bit clunky and requires a lot of setup to become free. So that's my problem. It requires a lot of setup. So it does require this is really bad in modern, but and I love Teferi. But I think it's really bad in modern.
That makes me slightly less confident in my pick if Teferi Master Crim is saying no to this Teferi in modern. But I still want to try. My theory is free things are always good. And I don't think it takes that much work. Like, it does take some work, but it's not like you got to jump through a ridiculous amount of hoops. Birds of Paradise and Utopia Sprawls and Artifact Lands are all cards that already see play. So it's not like you got to go super, super deep. But you are right that even if it's free, it doesn't do a ton compared to a Jace or a big Teferi or a Nahiri or something. It's not really doing all that much, even if it is free.
In these colors, it just doesn't do enough for the hoops that you, I think that even the amount of work you have to put in to get it free is not enough. It's not enough of an upside. It needs to be able to shut off maybe my opponent's abilities to cast at instant speed, right? Or something. But the thing is, it just kind of all right, cool, I untap stuff. Your turn.
I will say I'm glad this Teferi does not shut down your opponents from casting stuff at instant speed. I think I'm done with that abilities on Teferi for the time being. Let's keep moving forward. Next on our list, we got an interesting one. Rite of Harmony, little 2-mana flashbacky card advantage generating instant. Crim, what are you envisioning with this new Selesnya flashback spell?
I think I might be higher on this spell than you are, so I you know what, it's fine, it's fair. I think this goes right into Enchantress. There already are Enchantress decks, and the thing is, this is flashback. That's the biggest thing. So you can play stuff from the graveyard, or you can play this from your graveyard, and then you can pop off pretty easily with this. Maybe you play Enchantress if you would, and then you play that Teferi that you just mentioned. But you can untap, you can just get to draw whenever a creature or enchantment enters the battlefield, and when you're an Enchantress deck, those are one and the same, right? Almost all your creatures are enchantments, so you just keep drawing. It's another Enchantress effect that's cheap too. It's only 2 mana, and it's kind of, I look at it like kind of like a glimpse of nature, but for enchantments.
I think it's a very interesting card to me. We've seen Glimpse of Nature be banned in modern. That's how good Glimpse of Nature is at least feared to be. I don't think it's ever actually been legal. It was banned initially on the first modern ban list because of its combo potential in decks like Elves. Adding enchantments to the mix definitely is a new twist that we haven't seen on a card like this. My concern with playing Enchantress is I kind of wonder if I'd rather just have a permanent enchantress. Like, do I want this temporary for a turn draw cards, or would I rather just play like a Sethis or an Enchantress's Presence and have that effect that is not significantly more mana, more fragile, I guess, that it can get killed and ruin your plans, which is definitely a concern. But do I want a permanent version of an Enchantress, or do I want this one turn aspect of Enchantress?
It gives you 2 shots, right? Because you have the front side and then you get the flashback side. And you know 4 mana is not hard to do with the new like mana dorks that add equal to the enchantments you have. So I think that's why I like it, because yes, it is more of like a 2-time thing or maybe a 1-time thing, but let's just say you get this Thought Seized or something, you can play it again. You know, like you cast this the first time and you can cast it again later to set up for a future turn. There's a lot you can do because of the flashback part of it.
Yeah, I think that is true. And the other thing that's interesting about it is it triggers when the enchantment enters the battlefield, when a lot of the enchantresses trigger when they are cast. And while cast is often an upside because you draw even through counters, this does open up some shenanigans where we have like Resurgent Belief and other cards that can put enchantments from your graveyard into play. So maybe there's some like shenanigans that can take advantage of how this card is worded. So I don't think this card is bad by any stretch, and I'm definitely interested to see what it can do. And I think sooner or later, we're going to have one of these effects be good enough to make Elf combo a thing, kind of like Glimpse of Nature is in Legacy. I think this is an upgrade over Beck Call, I think is the most similar one that we've had in the format currently. Like this is definitely an upgrade over that. So maybe there's some potential there as well. Maybe we'll actually have like the combo Elf Ball deck show up in Modern, in part because of this effect existing.
Yep, exactly.
Well, let's keep moving on. Next on our list, we have the Crim Special. I know you love this card, Crim. The POPPET Stitcher / POPPET Factory. So is this Monastery Mentor, Crim?
It is not Monastery Mentor, but it's like something that I just can't get away from this card. The older the format, the more I love this card. Is it not just awesome being able to just spawn a ton of 2/2s. Yes, they don't have prowess, and they're not very good defensively, but you can POPPET Factory, right? And then all the downside goes away. So Modern just has better and cheaper efficient spells. So why not play POPPET Stitcher? And maybe now, like instead of like having to splash white for a Monastery Mentor, you could just play blue-black, right? And you have your own Monastery Mentor to sideboard in as a control deck. And then of course, if you're any kind of tempo deck, this is essentially another way to have a token generator. Like Prismari or Is It Tempo now has a Monastery Mentor of their own. Yes, they have Young Pyro, but this pairs quite nicely with Young Pyro. So, because now your Young Pyro stuff is a real beater, right? Because those 1/1s become 3/3s, and this spawns 2/2s. So there's a lot here. I love this card.
There is some upsides to this card, I think. It's not as good as Monastery Mentor. I think everyone knows that. The prowess tokens on Mentor are really good, but being blue is actually really interesting. I think that opens up possibilities. It allows you to pitch it to Force Negation, which is something your Monastery Mentor is not going to do. And one of the problems with Monastery Mentor is white is an awkward color for that. Blue is a much better Monastery Mentor color. You got your Thought Scours, you got your Considers, you have all the cheap cantrips in blue. So I could certainly imagine this showing up in some sort of Is It Spellslinger style deck. I can imagine this showing up in some sort of mono blue style deck. Maybe you just play mono blue and you're playing this and whatever, a whole bunch of spells and counter spells, and your main plan is just to counter all of your opponent's stuff and make a huge board of tokens and then flip this around so your zombies are not decaying and you can actually use them like real creatures. That seems legitimate. It's not legendary, so you can stack up multiples of them. So even though in a vacuum it's not Monastery Mentor, I still think that it is a powerful card, and I think you're very right that the further back you go, the more enablers you have for this. You have the Manamorphoses and the Lava Darts and all these cheap and free spells that can let you really make a huge board really, really quickly with this card.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep moving forward. Number 4 on our list, we have a card that I think is a pretty big upgrade over a past card that sees some play in the format. Sunset Revelry, 2 mana sorcery. If your opponent has more life than you gain 4 life. If they have more creatures than you get 2/1/1 human tokens. And if your opponent has more cards than you draw a card. This compares to timely reinforcements. And I will be curious of your opinion on this, Crim. Timely reinforcements still sees quite a bit of play, especially in Snapcaster decks, one of the better hoser sideboard cards against aggro in your control deck if you have Snapcaster to flash it back. My guess would be this is just an upgrade. Sure, it's 2 less life. Sure, it's 1 less token, but being 1 less mana, especially if your plan is to flash it back with Snapcaster, is a pretty big deal, especially with how fast Modern has gotten now, where the difference between Snapcaster this for 4 mana and Snapcaster Timely for 5 mana, I think that's probably worth giving up a little bit of extra life. Plus, you get the fringe upside that maybe you'll draw a card, although I kind of think that text almost doesn't exist, because if you're the control deck against aggro, which is normally where this card's going to see play, hard to envision the control deck ever having less cards in hand, but hey, maybe once in a while you get a card out of it too. But what do you think, Crim? How does this compare to timely reinforcements in Modern?
Well, pretty much all the points that you had mentioned are true, right? I mean, like, maybe this is, I remember I was initially a little bit higher on this card than you were. I don't know if you're coming around to it, but I
actually forgot about it.
No,
in all honesty, that's why it was not initially on my list, is I just completely spaced.
Okay, fair. Well, I mean, I think, believe it or not, that last option is also a lot better than it's going to be more relevant than you think it would be, because this is something now that maybe, let's just say, I want to get also aggressive because I want to board in against the blue-red deck, right? Well, the blue-red, I'm not saying this is like the truth, but this is better than like Timely. It has applications in some matchups. Sometimes I'm just like, well, I have too many cards that just are medium against blue-red, and the being able to draw more, or maybe let's say this means that like red decks can't like hold onto their lands, right? If I'm in a top deck war and they start holding onto their lands, well, this is actually going to punish them for holding onto those lands. So like this is super solid. It's strictly better, 2 less life. The most important thing about Timely was that you could counter a Boros Charm, but the issue here is that oftentimes it would get you for 3 mana, you'd be playing right in the Skullcrack, and that 1 mana difference is major. Like, being able to Snapcaster this on 4 is all the world's difference, or casting this on 3 with Spell Snare or something up to counter a Skullcrack is huge.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And even though it's less life, it's enough of a buffer, like against a deck like Burn, where you're going to want this. The difference between 4 and 6 isn't that big. Like, a lightning bolt's 3 damage. You're probably buying 2 to 3 extra turns with Sunset Revelry, when a timely reinforcement, you might be buying like 3 to 4 extra turns. So really, with how it plays out in the game, I don't think the difference between 4 and 6 is that massive, especially when you consider the mana discount that you're getting and the upside that you're right. There probably will be times that you can draw cards, or there might be times when having this in your sideboard, you'll be able to bring it in as a potential cantrip just to get rid of something that's even more dead than that is in the matchup.
Yep. And those 2/1/1 bodies, maybe that'll help. So yeah.
And human synergies. Not that I don't think that's a big selling point on the card, but human tokens that is a relevant creature type.
They could have been snails.
Well, let's move on to number 3 on our list. We have the return of Faithless Looting, almost sort of faithful mending. Exactly Faithless Looting, except +1 color, +1 mana on the front side, and you get to gain some life along the way, and it's an instant. What do you think about this one in the Modern format, Crim? I'm really curious. We haven't really seen this effect in the Azorius colors before. What do you do with it?
Well, this is a card I was super pumped on too, right? And a lot of it is in the uncommon and the common area for this set for me, and it's all spells pretty much. And it's because Modern is loaded with powerful cheap effects, and this, though costing 1 more than the usual Faithless Looting, we have seen some Jeskai Luris decks running around. And we've seen some, like, with Dreadhorde Arcanist, yada, yada, yada. This fits right into that. And then on top of that, this kind of spell is something, it opens up the doorway, like the gateways for blue-white graveyard shenanigans. And I like that. It has flashback on top of that. And it's the same cost as Faithless Looting. I mean, well, at least when you overall mana value wise. And yeah, we just haven't seen this kind of effect. So I guess I'm more high on the possibilities that this card's opening up. And then on top of that, the 2 life gain isn't exactly something to scoff at, right? Like, I mean, we had mentioned there are burn decks. They're popular again. This can, you know, pay for an Eidolon ping or something like that, right? So this has a lot of applications in that way. I love it. It's a Faithless Looting with the life gain and flashback. It costs one more, but, you know, it's in colors that we've never seen. So I love it.
Yeah, I like this card a lot too, and I think in some ways you could argue it is very close to the power level of Faithless Looting. I know it's going to play much differently. A lot of the Faithless Looting effects, you have like Hollow Ones and Red Madness effects and so forth. I don't think you're going to build the exact same kind of decks with Faithful Mending, but I do think there's really sweet things you can do with this. In the somewhat distant past, we've seen like Gifts Ungiven Reanimator decks in these colors, or like Esper Solar Flare style Reanimator decks. And honestly, Reanimator has gotten a big boost of power with Modern Horizons, adding Arcana Cruelty to the format, adding cheaper reanimation like Persist to the format. So I could see some sort of Esper or even blue-white style reanimation deck being a part of this. The life gain is actually really helpful, I think. I think that 4 life is, like you said, nothing to scoff at in a format where there's a lot of really aggressive decks, and there's very painful mana bases with fetches and shocks. So that little bit of life can be the difference in getting you that extra turn to reanimate your Sarah's Emissary and lock up the game between dying to a burn spell or a lightning bolt or something. So the possibilities seem pretty endless for this card. Like, there's so many options, and being an instant is huge. This is a card that you can play your Teferi and untap your 2 lands and then cast your Faithful Mending on your opponent's turn. Like, that's a really big deal as well. Or just desperately drawing. Like, worst case, you have this hanging out in your graveyard and you're about to die and you look for that counter spell or that Path to Exile. So yeah, I think this card's going to see a lot more play than maybe some people are expecting in Modern, and probably be pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep moving on. Number 2 on our list, we have, I think, my personal favorite Modern card from the set, and that is Champion of the Perished. We talked about it in Historic, and a lot of the same things are true as far as this powering up the zombie tribe, except in Modern, you get that on steroids, essentially. In Modern, you have the pieces to make this really, really powerful. You have Carrion Feeder as a sack outlet. You got Gravecrawler that you can keep casting. You have so many sacrifice zombie synergies. That's kind of what the deck does. You even had like Goblin Bombardment zombie style shells that people have had some success with in the format, that is built around sacking your Relentless Dead, sacking your Gravecrawler, getting it back. And all you do is play this on turn 1 and just have it sit out in the battlefield as you're doing what your deck was going to do anyway. And then next thing you know, this is a 5/5, and then it's a 7/7, and then it's a 10/10, and it's just the biggest thing on the battlefield that's taking down Tarmogoyfs and Death Shadows. So I'm really high on this card for Modern, and Zombies in Modern is one of the decks I'm most excited to start playing as soon as the set comes out. But Crim, what do you think about good old Champion of the Perished?
It's been quite some time since I've played with a Geralf's Messenger, and I love zombies. Yeah, surprise. The horror movie guy likes horror, like zombies. Yes, I know. But yes, this is the 1-drop, and we actually have Gravecrawler here. Yeah. So I love this card. I love this too. This is a powerful 1-drop, and we've seen once again humans get carried on the back of a powerful 1-drop. I mean, of course, humans also has just a ton of like, you know, solid effects stacked, like stapled together in one deck. But zombies are another archetype or tribe that gets lots of love from the world of Magic. And this card's only going to get better over time. If not this set, sooner or later, zombies will make its way back into the meta, or so I hope. Because this is just a cool tribe, and this card just is very strong. So please let zombies be viable, because I want to play Geralf's Messenger.
Yeah, I think zombies, they're definitely improving. They're improving set by set. I think that once they are a legitimate tier deck, Champion of the Parish will certainly be in the deck. I don't even really see any chance that it won't be in the deck. As you said, whether or not this is enough, do we got to wait until the next Innistrad we get a couple more zombies? We'll have to wait and see. But Champion of the Parish, huge deal for the zombie tribe in Modern.
If anything, that's pretty flavorful. Zombies are going to eventually get there. They are inevitable. Someday soon, they will be good.
All right, let's move on. Number 1 on our list, we have, again, a random common. Consider. This was number 1 on our historic list, and it definitely deserved to be. I think it's even better in Modern. Modern's a format of Snapcasters and graveyard decks and so many graveyard shenanigans. This card seems insane to me. Crim, what do you think about this one in Modern?
everything we said about this card in Historic is twice as true in Modern, right? So amazing, like your graveyard is actually your second hand. So Storm, and like the card pool, like the decks that would want this expands exponentially in Modern. Because now we have Storm, we have combo decks, we have, you know, tempo decks, we have control decks, whatever, right? Like this, any deck that was playing Opt is actually just going to replace it. I mean, there may be some arguments in like maybe Historic to keep Opt. It's unlikely, but now every deck is just that's gonna play a cantrip. It's gonna play this in Modern. Because Surveil is a powerful ability. You staple that onto a 1-mana cantrip. That's what Modern loves.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that this is more than draw a card a lot of the times. Like surveilling into your library in a format like Modern, in the decks that are going to want this, which are often going to be Snapcaster decks, Storm decks that are using the graveyard, other decks with graveyard shenanigans, milling the card rather than putting it to the bottom of your library like Opt. Many times that's going to be akin to actually drawing an extra card because you're going to be casting that card from your graveyard anyway. So if you really squint hard, this is like draw 1.5 cards for 1 mana or 1.75 cards or something, which is a lot of value. This is a really, really good cantrip, and it's still instant speed, so it works with all the shenanigans there. I think if you're playing Opt, it replaces it, and this might squeeze into some additional decks just because it might not look like it, but it really is a very meaningful upgrade compared to Opt. The difference between Surveil and Scry is really huge and doubly so in a graveyard format like Modern. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Modern cards from Innistrad. So now you've seen our top 10. Let us know what you think. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What are you hyped to play in the Modern format? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, Crim. Thanks so much for hanging out and doing it. It's always a blast.
Yes, I love doing these, so thanks for having me.
And I guess that brings us to the end of our reviews for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. So we'll be back with more top 10s in a couple of months. We got another Innistrad set. We'll have spoilers in a month or something. It is coming soon. So until then, enjoy Innistrad, everyone. Thanks again for watching, and we will talk to you soon. Looking for even more Innistrad Midnight Hunt coverage? Well, you could check out some of our other awesome videos here and here.